Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser Monday Night Podcast. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Paul Bickler. Paul, how are we doing?
It's Monday. Dad's out of the office today, so I feel like it's on us to do the weather report. It dropped below 65 here in coastal North Carolina, so I am freezing and hate everyone.
And Alan checks in. Good evening from a chilly Houston, 62 degrees right now, so it's clear that the weather reports are coming in. I was going to open the show that way and actually say, when the teacher is away, the kids will play, was kind of like a mentality that I thought about. And that's kind of what happens on the nights when we are given the free pass without Dad and or our host and friend Timuchin running the show. I always used to joke too, like, I feel like I'm a substitute teacher. And anytime a substitute teacher came in, I always questioned like what movie we were going to watch that day.
Yeah, right.
And I do in some way feel like, so for all the people clamoring for trivia, we have the slide, but that's all you goddamn get when Timuchin's not here.
Hell yeah.
Because we don't like to embarrass ourselves on this program. And normally on the weeks that I have an answer, he calls on you first, and then you give the answer. And I don't want to agree with you because that's usually a recipe for disaster. But like last week, I was going to say Ian Rush, and I would have got it right. But he went to you first. And then I thought to myself, I should change this shit up. But yeah, there is.
Yeah, this
always,
is there are really
substitute.
distinct advantages to just being the dumbest guy in the room. Like you get to go first. Yeah,
it is true. That is how the world works. I will say, when I was talking on the substitute teacher thing, when I was a freshman in high school, right? I had this class 2 periods a day. It was like law and order. It was basically like a way to get around not having to take world history as a sophomore. So I did it. And it was 2 periods a day with this woman, and she's no longer with us, God rest her soul. But she had like a fifth of bourbon in her drawer. So I figured like that was the teacher I wanted 2 periods a day. And she loved my older sister, who was 7 years older than me. Well, she got like basically put on, I like to call it drunk leave because they found her drunk in school. And they basically were like, you're going to retire. And what did they decide to do? They decided to hire my fucking sister to be her permanent sub. So as a 14-year-old loudmouth galley, I had my 21-year-old, 22-year-old sister as a substitute teacher 2 periods a day. And if you want to talk about some of the greatest and most ridiculous school stories of all time, of like we would fight in the classroom like we were in our like living room as kids, and it was just ridiculous. But if you ever want to know what pain is like, be a 4'11" freshman with a beautiful 20-something-year-old sister as the substitute teacher in the school. And understand, I got in quite a few fights, and none of them were defending her honor as much as they were like my pride. But God, it was genuinely something special. It's always great when I can find ways to bond with Kazi this early in a program. My mathematics teacher had a bottle of whiskey in his top drawer. He was an Everton fan, so completely understandable. I love it.
See, and I was thinking he's a mathematics teacher, so completely understandable.
And Kazi says, Gally describing a Pornhub search here.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of movies that start like that.
Pretty much 100%. Like, I'm not even kidding when I say this. People would come up to me and be like, I need to talk to you about your sister. And I would be like, no, you really don't. Now, I will say I had the last laugh because she was beautiful and she is beautiful. And I love my sister. But like, my sister was as gay then as she is now. And these dudes just absolutely, if they had known that, it would have made their heads actually explode. But then it was just like this like broken thing because they would just tell me what they would do to my sister. And I would sit on the inside and be like, I know she's gay, but I can't tell you guys that yet because she hasn't told people that. And the best part about this is it's like, you have no bleeping chance. You have zero chance. Like there are girls in this school that have a much better chance than you. And it was just outstanding. So my sister would love me sharing the out story of how our high school went. But that's what we do here on this podcast, especially when the principal isn't here. Yeah, that's right, Tamuchin. You're the principal.
That may be the most ground that we've covered in the first 5 minutes of a show ever.
Yeah, and honestly,
we hit multiple different porn genres. We hit we've gone through a lot.
We have, and we've actually had a lot of activity from the comments section, which lets us know it's this type of information that the listeners are waning and yearning for on Mondays at 8:00. So let's get into it. It's international break, right? And international breaks drive me crazy because there isn't real football. There's just international football. And occasionally we have stories to talk about. And we will get into current Liverpool players. But I honestly couldn't take this opportunity and not talk to you specifically about what happened to our former captain, the existing England captain, the night that it occurred, and more or less what the response was from the manager and the supporters. So I have to ask you, Paul, first and foremost, I'm sure you heard about Henderson being vitriolly booed off by English supporters. And then, of course, Southgate's understandable defense of a player he has managed for 3.5 to 4 years and done a good job by him. Is this more about England supporters not wanting to see Jordan Henderson play over Jude Bellingham? Or is this really a response to Jordan Henderson, the man, taking the bag of money, kind of going against his principles, and the English supporters making sure they had an opportunity to let him know they didn't appreciate it from someone I think they respected?
Oh, I think it's opportunistic for England fans, to be quite honest. I mean, like, so look, I think the beauty of international break is I genuinely genuinely don't care what happens. And then Robertson goes and breaks an arm and this happens. And I instantly care tremendously. So like, because I think both of these things matter. I think if I look at I don't know, dude, this is probably unfair and I'm probably going to get a lot of shit for this, but I feel like people who closely follow their international teams are usually casual football fans. And I think there are probably people that are going to take me to task about this, but I just feel like the people that I know that follow international football are sort of more casual fans. And I think the casual fan never understands Jordan Henderson, nor wants to. And I think there's a large amount of supporters that just between the Liverpool connection and just not understanding what he does for a football team genuinely don't like him. So I think that like it was an opportune time to get on the hate wagon here and really to like go after him, considering how he played and considering what happened this summer. So I think it was a crime of opportunity. I also think it was well deserved, personally. So
yeah, I feel like in some ways, and I don't think he won, and I think part of it's why he deflected so much. I think it was as much an indication to Southgate for selecting him. Like, why is he here? Why is the guy playing in front of 900 people against mediocre talent, mediocre competition? Why is a 30-something-year-old here for qualifiers we didn't need him for? And for you to play him and make Jude Bellingham the hottest player in all of European football, playing at the biggest club right now, right? Let's be real. Real Madrid is one of the 3 or 4 biggest clubs in the world. Jude Bellingham went there with all the plaudits, and he is their best player. The best player in the Liga. First player ever to win the Player of the Month. His first 2 months in the league, and he's just turned 20 years old. The kid should be being groomed to be the England captain, in my opinion. He's the best all-around footballer that plays for the Three Lions, and he's sitting on the bench in a home match so you can trot out a guy who went to a retirement league literally to retire.
Oh, yeah. So the selection itself makes me wonder if Southgate is qualified for anything. Because, like, selecting him in this situation means either you don't know how to evaluate talent when you leave somebody like James Ward-Prowse at home, or B, you have no idea about what the public is and how optics work, because you would never put a player of Jordan Henderson's ilk in that position if you cared as much as you say you care about him. I think he was just automatically put in a lose-lose. I don't know why you would select him. I don't think it was fair to the national team. I don't think it was fair to Jordan Henderson. And I don't think it was fair to the players who got left out because there were we always talk about the omissions, right? But I mean, I just think, dude, you can no longer in any world justify Jordan Henderson taking up a spot from somebody in the national team setup, especially if you've seen how he's been doing over there, playing in front of 7,000 fans on average. I caught some highlights of stuff over there, and it's just like these dudes are legitimately playing against people with part-time jobs. You got to be kidding me. The pace of play is nowhere near what it is anywhere else. I just do not understand on what grounds, on what merit are you selecting Jordan Henderson into this position right now? There's none.
It's arguably people make fun of, and I know because it's an American thing, right? And the TV show and all this and the American owners, everyone makes fun of Wrexham and what they're doing. But in how all the kind of they're paying higher wages at that level than other clubs, which allows them to get some retiree type players like a James McLean to go there and help lead. Well, right. That's basically what England decided to do. They basically rolled out a guy who had no business being called up into the side. I'm not advocating that Curtis Jones is a full level England international, but Curtis Jones today is a better footballer than Jordan Henderson is. He's a better midfielder. And he's done more over the last 3 months to make you think he belongs in an international setup. That was just one guy. You named James Ward-Prowse. This is the same guy that won't give Maddison a legitimate run out with this side because he feels like he doesn't fit. Foden's never been utilized. Yet Southgate just proves that it doesn't really matter because he called in Harry Maguire and Calvin Phillips, two other guys who don't belong based on what they're doing for their current clubs. And it just, if I'm a young English player, right? People wonder why Flo Balogun wanted to go play for the United States. It might be that he thought he could start, and I'm not going to knock that. But you know what?
Right.
Wilf Zaha decided he wanted to play for the Ivory Coast because England didn't care enough about him to make him part of the setup. And I think that's what we're going to find more and more happen. They're lucky, really lucky that Saka signed on and played for them and didn't go play for Nigeria where his father was born, because they're going to lose more and more of these players. So didn't want to spend a ton of time on the Henderson topic, but I thought it was something worth talking about. We spent a lot of time this summer talking about how that Saudi league would affect us. So, you mentioned it already. The international break is a fun void. And I will say, I do agree with you about the casual fan. Now, I don't think every England fan doesn't follow the sport, or right. Every France fan, or, we know in our Discord channel alone, the Irish folks, they don't talk about Ireland at all unless one of them national teams is playing. And then they tell you everything. And it all goes back to Thierry Henry touching a ball with his hand and how they've been wronged and nothing's come right since. I'll tell you what, losing 2-0 to Greece at home, that's something wrong. And I'm Irish, people, just so we clear the air here. Looking at this map, this was more or less just to talk about the Liverpool players as a whole. And I'm going to have to look at my notes here. We're not going to talk about every game, but there have been some meaningful ones. I thought the Netherlands-France game obviously was a big one, not only because it's two world powers, two teams that believe they can win the Euros, win the World Cup, should be competing for high honors. Virgil obviously captains the Netherlands side. He was really poor. I think in the overall ratings systems I saw, he was the lowest rated player on either team in the starting 11. And he was at fault for one of the goals. Konate, on the other hand, gets kind of a surprise start for France, especially based on the minutes he's been getting, and played really, really well and was the vocal leader at the heart of the French defense. Do you think this is a sign of what's to come for France? They have, you could name off, what do they have? 7, 8 quality center backs right now.
At least. Yeah.
And Konate seems like he is in Deschamps' frame as being one of his preferred starters. Now, the young player there wasn't available Saliba from Arsenal. And I think if he was, I'm not sure Konate gets the start, but I think Konate has to see that as a really good sign, right? And as a Liverpool supporter, should be a good sign if a country like France, a world power in international football, sees him as one of their best 11.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we need to get back to the point where like Konate is playing well for us, because he hasn't in quite some time. And, I think we do still have serious questions about the durability, but I mean, I think Konate absolutely is and has to be the center of what we look at as the future of that back line, right? And I think, man, dude, like I feel like I'm like the sky's falling, dude, on Virgil, but I still so strongly believe that this is a deteriorating asset, and it is going to be deteriorating at a very, very rapid rate before our eyes. I don't think this is something, I know a lot of people think it's just a collective issue with the entire team settling in. I just don't. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I watched all these matches. I worked 26 hours between Friday and Sunday and caught what I could, but like, I don't usually follow these international breaks too closely, but I did want to see what happened with Greece, considering the fact that Samikis is going to be playing for us. So yeah, I don't know, man, but I think Konate in the French setup is only a good thing for us. It's just a general. I mean, I think that's going to carry a lot of weight and a lot of momentum in terms of like where his mindset is, very much in the way that negatively affected Trent when Trent was out of the frame. So let's hope we can get the inverse of that.
So you mentioned we're going to get to the Robertson thing. It's a little bit of a topic for itself in this podcast tonight. So we're going to skip over that Scotland match in this international window here. But let's talk a little bit about the Greece-Ireland match, where I mentioned earlier, Greece came out 1-2-0. Tsimikas was the player of the match, voted both by the media in the stadium and by like all accounts. His assist for the first goal was brilliant. It was exactly what you expect from the left peg. And he was good all in all. But it's against an Ireland team without Ferguson, which means they have no attack. So I'm nervous because then you hear today, and Alan Walnut, Alan shared with us, right? Virgil scored the penalty that beat Greece today, 1-0. And that's great, but I don't need my captain and the best center back in the world to score goals. I need him to stop goals from shipping in and play well and make everyone around him better. It makes me a little nervous that even the Greek manager today decided to play Kostas as his left wing instead of his left back, because he felt that his skill sets were best going forward and being an attacker and not defending, especially on a week that we have decided that we need this guy to defend for the next 8 to 10 weeks. And anyone, by the way, I had a gruesome left shoulder dislocation when I was 19 years old. They flew in specialists from Dartmouth to set my arm because none of the people in Keene, New Hampshire at the hospital would even attempt it. And they were talking about amputating my left arm. Oh. There is no dislocation that is like 4 to 6 weeks. A full dislocation is at least 8 weeks. And after that, it's about strengthening it up. And all it takes is one time. Like, I used to dislocate my shoulder putting on my jersey to play when I was playing like intramural sports in college. I would dislocate my shoulder, taking a shower and literally washing it. Like, once it comes out once, it just keeps happening, and it happens over and over. So like, anyone who thinks this guy's going to be back by December or Christmas, it's probably really shooting at fool's gold. So we're going to have to play with Tsimikas. And we're going to get to that in a conversation in a little bit. Does it bother you or make you nervous that his own manager, off a man of the match performance, moved him up against a team that really they should have needed to defend better against?
Maybe he just thought he could take advantage of Verge. I don't know.
It's so work, they lost 1-0.
Yeah, that's so wrong. So wrong. Sorry, it's low hanging fruit. No, it's not great. It'll be interesting, man. I don't know. I once again, I felt like this summer I said like I know that we needed a midfield retool, but we really needed a versatile defender, right? Left-footed center back, versatile defender, somebody could flare out. I mean, honestly, somebody like Timber would have been absolutely perfect from Ajax because he could play both fullbacks and center back.
Or Van de Veen from that went to Tottenham. He would literally be slotting in right now as our starting left back.
Right. So, but anyway, not to cry over spilt milk. I think, we're going to have to figure it out. Let's hope we get prime Tsimikas who can deliver those outstanding corners and then bang in some set piece goals out of this thing. And then, I think what really makes me nervous about it more than anything is who he's paired with. It really makes me nervous that he's paired with an aging Van Dijk. So we'll see what happens. This is going to be a wild ride, though.
Alan just commented, and we always love to bring up our comments. So please, if you're watching us right now on Facebook, on X, on YouTube, please share your comments. We'll bring them up on screen. We always appreciate them. I saw a weird news item today say the newsstand had some failure with concrete. Now I can't find the article. You guys heard anything? We're going to talk about the newsstand and the issues they're having a little later and how it might impact the club. I did not see anything with the issue with the concrete as much as it was the issue with the construction company finishing the job on time, and the club's moronic stance about selling tickets that aren't actually available until they're available. So right. I know Kazi had a lot of comments earlier today, and I think they were merited. We all know Kazi will take some shots at the ownership group, and at times they're right. And I think the way they're handling this isn't good and needs to be improved. But I do believe that there is more about the builders than it is a bad decision by the group. The problem is they should have had a commitment to have this stand done before the beginning of the season, or they shouldn't have started the work when they did at the end of a season and a half ago. So let's get into the match that was probably the most talked about and important. Andy Robertson takes a tough dive, tough drop. Keeper comes down on him. I've seen some Liverpool supporters actually trying to blame other people for this. This is a freak injury that happens, people. This is why it's great that your players are good enough to be international quality, and also why you wish that 16 of your 22 aren't always going away during these breaks. Because I think it was you and maybe Kazi during our pre-match shows kept talking about, I just root for Liverpool support players to get off the pitch uninjured and get back to training camp and get back to the season when it resumes. I've been very critical about Robertson. You've questioned Robertson. I know Timuchin's questioned Robertson so far this year. But how big of a loss is this when we talk about the player? Forget about the replacement. But when it comes to the tactics that we're playing and the way that we're setting up now, how big of a loss is this just knowing you have that continuity and a player that is one of the first names on the team sheet each and every single week, right? I don't think there's a question about that.
Right. No, I mean, I feel like this would be a critical blow 18 months ago. I feel like now, because of I feel like he is also just a rapidly declining asset. I almost think that this could be a blessing, because I feel like the last time we really saw Costas kick off and do well is when he got a sustained run of play. And so maybe he can do the same. Maybe he's continued to develop defensively. Let's hope. And maybe a sustained run of play is what he needs, very similar to Curtis Jones, to turn a corner. And so, that's the way I'm going to choose to look at this. Obviously not the best, not ideal, but I don't think that this is I think that we're fooling ourselves if we think this is what losing Robertson 2 years ago would have looked like.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more there. And I've said before, I use this graphic specifically because we use this to announce the new contract. Because when the new contract was signed, I was one of the first ones. I think Timuchin was very much in my corner where it was like, great, this is a contract to make sure that he has 5 years of a contract for the next club that buys him at his level, whether that be a lower level Premier League team, whether that be a team in, I think this guy would like crush it in Serie A. The way they play, the way they defend, they hang back, but then they go forward. His in balls, and he's not going to AC Milan or Juventus, but he could go to Lazio and have a really, really good career for himself. He could go to a middling club, even a Roma, and probably do good work for himself.
Yeah.
And I think the style of the game fits him. I think the Premier League is just too physical for him. And I think that's where I've struggled with him. So how does our tactics change to support him having to run out 8 matches in a row? Because, Brian Shelton says Bradley is close to full fitness. Here's the thing. Connor Bradley ain't coming through that door to save the season at Liverpool Football Club. We're not winning the Premier League if we are waiting on Connor Bradley. So, to me, this guy has to do the business. But I also feel like Klopp's got to change some things, right? To, play to his skill sets.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? To me, this is who's going to play on that left side, this almost makes more sense. In the past, I would say, let's tuck, Gravenberch can play that left side, or a player like McAllister can even tuck over there. It almost makes me feel like the midfielder that makes the most sense there is Curtis Jones. And that's wild to say, given the retool in midfield and the players that we have, that the one that probably offers you the most protection for a new player coming in after losing Robbo is probably Curtis Jones is the really key piece to this thing. Because I think we're forgetting how much work defensively Mane did to help Robbo, and we've seen what that doesn't look like since he's left. And I think that's you don't have to worry about – I don't think that Costas is going to go forward to the degree Robbo is. But at the same time, it's critical that he has all the help, because I don't think he has the top end pace or the experience that Robbo has.
So do you think maybe that this forces Klopp to revisit his thought process around the midfield and start to play Endo more as a traditional 6 that actually sits in front of the center backs, which allows Virgil to do more of covering for Costas and helping him on the left side, like he used to do with Robertson, even at times when he went so far forward. When you had a Fabinho 6, is this what unlocks McAllister even moving into that spot where it's McAllister or Jones playing in that left-hand side? Because let's be honest, the goal for this season was Fabinho to reclaim his former self and form, and McAllister and Szoboszlai to play on each side of him. That was the goal until the Saudi money changed everything, and we kind of reshifted. Do you think this might move McAllister forward? Or
I think that would be the logical conclusion, but I will say the problem with that is that this is the manager that we talk about, always changing the pieces, but never the system.
Right.
So that's that's the thing. It's I don't think the leap between I don't think the gap, or I don't feel that Klopp feels like the gap between Robbo and Costas is big enough to retool the system. I just don't think that'll be it. Even though it probably needs to happen regardless, I don't think that's the thing that will do it. I really don't.
So let me ask you then, Paul Bickler, not what you think Jurgen Klopp thinks or does, but Paul Bickler. Does this side need the stability of improving both? If you're going to lose Robertson and the influence he gives you, both going forward and defending, and Costas is a drop-off from a defensive standpoint, and we've been critical of Robertson, but we've seen it in Costas, so we kind of know what he is. Is this enough of a need to actually get more defensive and bring in a real number 6 and start playing Endo, whether you start McAllister or not? Because I'd argue right now, off the run of play over 8 matches, that it hasn't worked with McAllister at the 6 overall. He's been asked to do things he doesn't do. It's starting to actually look like a detriment to the player because he didn't play that well for Argentina as well during this international break. Like, almost like he needs a reset, a game or two on the sidelines, let him get his head right, play endo, get a little defensive stability, and support the defenders and keep playing Curtis Jones and let McAllister earn the right to push Curtis Jones off the field. Because I almost feel like McAllister is teetering on that period of playing so much out of position. People are forgetting all the really great things we saw during the preseason. He was our most influential midfielder in the attack all of preseason. And then we forced him to play the 6 as soon as the year started.
So if I'm the manager, I'm changing the system, right? So let's say we can't change the system. So if we can't change the system, my answer is yes, we need to play with the true 6. If we can change the system, I'm playing with a double pivot. I'm either playing a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-2-2-2, which really benefits Darwin loads if you do that.
Yep.
But I think a 4-2, if you do a double pivot, you put Gravenberch and McAllister in a double pivot. Those are both players that have played that. McAllister's played in a double pivot for Argentina loads. Gravenberch has played it a lot at Bayern in the course of his career, also at Ajax. So I think you have a situation that puts arguably your two best midfielders with the highest ceiling in that double pivot formation that they're familiar with. And it allows you to have midfielders like Curtis Jones and Szoboszlai who like to get forward with license. So,
yes.
And it's also another formation that, like both Jota and Darwin, who like to play off the shoulder, that gives them the ability to be comfortable in more of that off the shoulder, off the striker role. So, I think to me that solves a lot of issues with one tweak. But if you're telling me that I'm not changing the system, I'm changing the parts, then yes, it's a true 6 with endo, which nobody seems to like that idea. But if you're stuck and you're not changing this and you're going 4-3-3, it's the only answer.
Yeah, I just can't see, and we're going to get to the Everton match and what we think our starting lineups will look like. I just don't see the way forward with continuing to play McAllister out of position at a 6 if you're going to stay in this 4-3-3 with this inverted tucked in fullback. It just doesn't feel like it feels like it actually wanes the skills that McAllister has. I think it also puts McAllister in a position that he becomes the focal point of the frustration of the supporters. And it's not fair. He hasn't been that bad. He really hasn't. But he hasn't been that good. And when you're off the boil as a new signing and you have other new signings like Gravenberch starting to show promise and you have Szoboszlai doing what he's doing on the other side, it starts to put so much more pressure on McAllister that I just don't feel is necessary. And I feel like these are the types of things when we give Klopp so much credit for his man management, and it's amazing. I do think sometimes we also underestimate the stubbornness that he has and how that negatively impacts his players at times. And I don't know that he ever gets enough of that gripe because, well, it's easy to love a guy like that, right? When you have that personality. So Brian Shelton brought up the Anfield Road expansion, the issues we're having, the problems. I didn't see the stuff about the concrete today. I do know the stand is complete. Like the stadium is done, but they can't get all of it finished and they can't get the right permits, I believe, is really the big issue to open it up from a safety standpoint. If you're handing out some blame pie here, Paul, is this going to the construction company for overpromising, the unions for basically going out on strike and holding the construction company unavailable, or is this down to FSG holding a little bit of the responsibility for the fact that they started selling match day tickets literally for seats that aren't installed yet?
So I think there's multiple different issues, right? So for it ending on time and for tickets, I think those are two different issues. For it ending on time, I'll say shit like this happens all the time, 100%. The time when these things are built. I think I mean, the only thing that you can really possibly fault them for was maybe not doing enough, maybe not vetting this company enough, because I mean, they essentially went into administration, right? So they went belly up in the middle of this thing. So my feeling is there's probably some pretty extensive safety checks happening right now, because generally when a company is going under, things don't necessarily get done the way they're supposed to, right? I mean, there's people cutting costs where they probably shouldn't cut costs. So I think there's probably some pretty serious auditing happening right now, considering the history of safety concerns in English football and stands. And I think now for the ticket situation, I absolutely fault the club. You just don't I don't know how you can in good faith go ahead and just expect something to be done on time and that we're going to allot and sell these tickets, even though they don't technically exist, right? I think that's on its face. I think that's just I don't think there's anything dark or vindictive about it. I just think it's very ignorant to do that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like, you guys know that I'm a Liverpool supporter, of course, and that I grew up here in Western Massachusetts watching the Boston Red Sox. These guys own the Red Sox. They've done amazing things with Fenway Park. They've created new seats, literally, in places that no one thought you could put another seat at Fenway Park. They took I think it was 38,000 when they took over ownership of the team. And last account, I think they can fit almost 48,000 people. They found a way in a stadium built in 1900, that opened in 1920, to put 12,000 more seats. They are smart businessmen, and they're smart about investing in their footprint. They missed here by 1,000,000%. And they were building that when Megan and I were in Liverpool for the Wolves match 2 seasons ago on the last day of the year. The cranes were up to start ripping that shit down the next day. They had 2+ years. There's no way you start selling tickets before you know the thing's going to be open. And the fact that they have literally 1,000 to 1,800 people without a ticket for a match against Everton on Saturday, that has no recourse to when they'll get a match day ticket or how they'll get reimbursed for it, is even more embarrassing. And that to me is you knew this was coming in the summer, but the problem I have is and I'll hold FSG to this, they were selling tickets in August after they announced it wouldn't be ready until the Everton match.
Right.
So you knew this shit was bad. You knew it was going off the rails, and you kept selling tickets on a dream. And it's basically no different than a Ponzi scheme. Really. They were literally asking for investment in things they knew weren't plausible. And there was a realistic chance that it was going to fall apart. And to me, that is an embarrassment. That's an indictment at the club. That is ownership level. That is not an FSG out, people. But this is real criticism. I get mad when I feel false criticism happens with regards to FSG. This is real. You can be frustrated with this. You can be irritated with this because I feel like they should have known better and could have done better. And I'm going to be interested to see what they do to all these supporters, because these supporters deserve a ticket. And these supporters deserve to be made whole. And I don't know how you do it, because everyone keeps saying it's shut down until January. I have no confidence that stand will be open in January. I hope that stand is open at some point in the second half of this season, but there's no confidence that I have that.
Yeah, you see, I thought I had seen something tonight that was saying that it wasn't going to be done this year, this season.
See, this is where I think they're having some problems. The first initial report said it would not be done this year, and everyone then jumped to it won't be done this season. When asked about it, they said this year is saying December 31st. But to be fair, that's the same type of fucking small talk that allows for loopholes that later they can be well, now it doesn't make sense financially to open that stand this year, or safety concerns. I'm not sure a supporter will be there. So let me ask you this. I'll change it off of the tickets and the process and the building. I saw one person saying like, this is a huge negative for Liverpool because the atmosphere and all this. It's basically about 3,300 seats that aren't being filled right now that would have been filled before the expansion started. Do you think it actually affects the atmosphere within the grounds or the players on the pitch? Because I actually don't, other than the fact that, like, it's kind of terrible. Like, you feel like you're playing in Italy where nobody sits in the bottom section and they're all in the upper bowl. Like, is it a conceptual thing that there are a whole section of the stadium not filled? Do you think it actually impacts it? Because to me, on the audio, on the television set, it doesn't feel like there's less atmosphere at Anfield for me. But maybe
and that's one of those things. I think probably overall it doesn't, but I think if you're used to going games and seeing a full stadium, it probably more psychologically feels that way than actually, like, if you're really listening to volume or like paying attention to how the ground feels. Like that's my guess. But I mean, like, the other thing is, like, you just, dude, not only are you building this thing, you just now lost out on all that revenue, Like, these are seats that you can't fill that you could have filled before, and you're now losing out on straight revenue across the board for multiple months. And, I know that, like, gate day receipts aren't like the top building piece for clubs, right? But I mean, it's still revenue. It's still revenue. Yeah. So
they still buy beer, they buy jerseys, they buy pies, and more than anything, they're there. And I think that's and it is 3,300 less people going to the Arcos pub and buying swag on the street and going to home bake before the matches. So you're hurting also the local community that relies on these match day revenues, right? Like, and I think that, to me, is another one of those things where the club has to take some ownership. Like, they have to take some of this on the chin. You can't control a company going belly up in the middle of your contract.
Right.
You did pick that company, though. And there are other companies building stands all over England. And most likely, they went with a very cost-friendly outfit. Because that's what they do, and that's what makes them good owners. They are good businessmen. Like, that's the one thing. Like, we all talk about FSG. No one has to care what they are as people. You can't question they're good business people, because everything they buy makes more money the moment they buy it, and then it actually operates better. The Red Sox operate better than the day they took them over in 2003, when they were hapless losers. And since they are arguably the most winning franchise in baseball, even though baseball fans love to hate on them, the truth is they've won 4 World Series in 20 years. Nobody else has in that timeline. They've done it. They've won with their the hockey team is getting better. The Penguins are much better than they were when they took them over, because they invested in the infrastructure, and they're going to end up building them a brand new stadium and rebuilding what they need in Pittsburgh to have like a winning thing. Like, this is what these guys do, but they have to have some egg on their face on this one. I've been an apologist at times. Can't apologize for this one, because this is what they don't do.
Yeah, this is like the way they handle
business. Bad business decisions.
This is like shades of when they took the seats out, right? What they did with the seats when they were ripping them out. Like, I think those are the types of things where, like, I mean, maybe there's just a little ignorance in terms of like what I think at that point that was a learning curve still in terms of what that type of stuff meant to the community, right? But this one feels similar in the fact that it's just it was a careless decision with not a whole lot of thought, and which is very, very uncharacteristic of what they do.
Yeah, they don't always make the right decisions, but I never believe that they actually haven't thought about the choices they're making. This feels like that. And this almost feels like they got pulled into it and they weren't aware of what could happen. And they're usually the guys who almost overthink themselves at times. And I feel like in this case, they underthought it. And then their response to it just wasn't good, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I can't wait for the stand to be completed. It looks beautiful. So I thought here, before we preview the Everton match and start to wrap this thing up, I thought it was a good spot coming out of this international break to kind of take a look at the fixtures as a whole as they come up. So on screen right now, right to left, are the next 6 fixtures including 2 Europa League matches and a midweek match in the EFL Cup, the League Cup in the round of 16. So let's focus to start on the 3 Premier League matches. We start with Everton, then Forest, then Luton. Feels very much like 9 points you have to secure, right? If you are a real competitor in this league, Paul.
Anybody surprised we got the first game coming out of international break?
No. And I tried my hardest to get through this entire podcast without giving Jurgen Klopp another reason, because we all know Jurgen listens to the podcast, to talk about those 7:30 matches. And it is getting to the point where even I, who am like, takes the old Bill Parcells line of give an athlete an excuse and he will use it. So let's stop giving them excuses. It is almost becoming comical, because I think I saw the other day, it's 14 times since Klopp took over, we have had the 7:30 a.m. game, the lunchtime kickoff in England, and the next closest side is Arsenal at 6.
Yeah. It really feels like they're purposely trolling Jurgen Klopp at this point.
But to be fair, he doesn't help himself when he goes to the press conference. It's like, for sure. I can't talk about it, because if I talk about it, they'll say I complain. But why are we playing at 7:30 again? And then like Henry Winters raises his hand and is like, you just talked about it and you are complaining. Like, it's pretty genius, actually.
Yeah. So these fixtures are 3 you got to have. These always make me nervous. It feels like last year when we dropped Leeds, and I can't remember who else.
Forest, Leeds and Forest back to back. Leeds at home, Forest on the road.
Yep. This feels like that. This feels like that. I mean, that's the flip side. Like, everyone can talk about how it's nice to have a soft run out, and this is great. But the flip side of that is like your season pivots on these matches, right? Especially if you're a front runner, and if you want to stay a front runner, you have to clean house on these matches. So it's got to be 3s across the board, especially in a league that's tied up top. Like, these are got to be points across the board all the way down. And honestly, like, the bottom of the Premier League is so bad this year, and this is really the bottom. Like, you can make an argument for Forest here. Everton obviously found goals last game for the first time, so they've got to have their tail up a little bit. Plus, it's a derby match, which is always tough. So Forest is look good going forward. I think these are sides though that are so poor defensively that this has got to be 3s across the board. I don't think you can make excuses either way.
So when we look at the Europa League, obviously, the group stage, we're back for match day 3 and 4, both against Toulouse. Not a club you should be struggling with putting out a lineup against. What does the rotation start to look like here? We have 3 straight midweek matches, which always is difficult when you have to add in that we've had some injuries here, and we have some guys coming back from injuries that need to really worry about their fitness here. Do you just go for it early here and try to win this group and just get out of it? Or do you rotate a little heavily in that first Europa League match and maybe even that cup tie that we have against Bournemouth, hope to get through those, navigate and move on? Like, where do you see the side and how Klopp looks at these? Or is it just Jurgen Klopp and he plays 14 guys over the 6 matches and worries about what happens in December?
Round of 16 EFL Cup, I'm probably playing the kids. I think Jurgen probably cares about it more than I do, though. And so I can't see it, but I'm playing the kids in that match. I think if it's me as a manager, I'm going with the mix in this first match, first Toulouse, and then essentially on that last one, if we need points to essentially secure that group, the top of that group, I'm going heavy on the back end of the stretch, right? So because I think, on where you're at, I think you can get away with some rotation versus Luton, and then you can essentially go out and have some rested starters go in and sort of clear out that last second half of that in the group stage for Europa.
Yeah, Dave Leslie says rotate heavily, I think. And I don't disagree. The caveat there is we say rotate heavily, but without Gakpo, we can't really rotate too much of the front other than giving one of the three a day off. Because literally now we're down to three main up front and Jota, right? Like, that's what we have at this point. Without Gakpo, until Gakpo gets back, it's Darwin or Jota and Diaz and Mo on each wing. Like, that's what we have. He's not going to give Ben Doak a start. He might start him in one of these matches, maybe the League Cup against Bournemouth. But I won't be shocked if Mo Salah is playing on November 1st against Bournemouth. I really won't be. I don't think he should be, but I won't be shocked. And I just think it's more about the midfield. It's just about getting Harvey minutes. It's about getting Gravenberch minutes, Endo minutes, McAllister, and Szoboszlai. And I think Jones coming back will be really, really key. And I hate to say it, I think there's a part of me that thinks that, like, by the time these matches happen, like, McAllister is actually playing the matches on the right-hand side of this screen and not on the left-hand side. And I think that it could be sad because I think a lot of pressure will start to get put on McAllister. And you know how we are. Like, we're a fickle supporter group. We love our players. We tell them how much we love them until they just slightly fall off the boil a little bit and we have questions about them. And then they're just shite. And then they, like, before you know it, you know as well as I do, we'll be reading that McAllister is basically Naby Keita 2.0. Like, we'll read it. We'll hear it. It'll happen. Like, Ox was flashy for a minute and wasn't there. So, to me, I really feel like the matches on the left-hand side scream just be defensively sound. And the way you score goals, you'll score. Which is why I think I'm so clamoring and calling for Endo to be kind of called into the side to see if he can play a role, because I think that gives us the defensive stability sitting in front of whether it's Kanate and Van Dijk or Matip and Van Dijk, and really giving more onus to defending. And to your point, we don't believe the manager is actually going to break from the 4-3-3. So to do that with Costas, you have to become more defensive minded, in my opinion, and that's playing with a true six. And I think Endo's the only true six on this roster, whether the supporters love him or not. And I don't know the manager loves him. I know that, we didn't get to this topic tonight. How Big George has basically gotten this, like, kudos in all the Liverpool papers, all the talking pieces from the club. Basically, all the reporters who still get any insight from the club are being told how he was so influential in the rebuild of the midfield this summer that he's been given the job through the end of May and may even get the job through another season. I'd really like to start to see some of these players like an Endo, like a guy he signed. Like, to me, Timuchin kept saying he's going to get us a gem from the Bundesliga. Well, we thought we kind of got that, and then the manager has refused to play him.
Right.
And when he has played him, I don't feel he's been that bad. Maybe I'm looking through rose-colored glasses. I thought he's been good. I don't think he's been great, but he's been good enough and serviceable. I've seen enough to know that he can do the job, and I do think we look better at the back when he's on the pitch. But Trent looks kind of confused when he's playing with him. And I almost feel like this new formation is blinding Klopp to think he needs a more mobile midfielder who can step forward like McAllister so Trent can fill those spaces. But I don't think it's actually helping us either at the defense or on the offensive side of things. So it's just really, really awkward for me. John Summy jumps in with, once McAllister gets in his intended position, he'll be awesome again. And where I agree with that is I think he can be a really good attack-minded going forward midfielder. Where I disagree with that in some ways is I don't know that he's going to force Curtis Jones out of this side, especially, to your point, Tsimikas playing on the left. And I think it would be hard on Jones for how well he's played at times this year to be benched to force a signing like McAllister forward, right? Like, I almost feel like, and then you have Gravenberch to bring into this equation.
Right.
And these are good problems to have, right? Like, it's a good thing to have. So while we're talking about problems, playing Everton's never usually a problem for this side. Paul, what do you do with this lineup? I almost feel like this 11 almost picks itself outside of Endo or Mac at the 6. So Saturday morning, you're sitting in North Carolina, 6:15, drinking black coffee. What do you expect when that lineup drops at 6:30? Do you expect Endo? Do you expect a really tired McAllister flying back in from Argentina, starting a match he probably shouldn't play? Is it Gravenberch at the 6? What's that midfield 3 look like for you Saturday morning?
Well, I would say that I would expect to see McAllister in the 6. However, he was so bad last time and he got hooked at halftime. So I feel like that was a lesson learned. I think this might be a spot we actually see Gravenberch start as a lone 6. So, I mean, because that's the other option is like, so if it were me, I'd put an Endo, right? I honestly feel like the last time that we saw an obvious spot for Endo to start, it was clear as day that it was a prime opportunity for him. He didn't start. So
right.
some until I'm proven otherwise, because we've seen this. We've seen players that we thought made sense being in this lineup get frozen out. Until I see otherwise, I'm going to say that I think it's more likely to see Gravenberch in that spot personally. But yeah, I agree. It should be Endo for me as well.
And yeah, Alan says Endo for me.
Yep.
I'm gonna say Endo, and I have nothing to go on this. I think this is the perfect match to start an Endo. I think it makes sense. It's at home. It's against Everton. He had less travel than the South American players coming back. I start Endo, and I start Gravenberch on the left, and I start Soboslai on the right. I give McAllister a break from the jump and let him come in. And when he comes in, he doesn't come in for Endo. Hopefully he comes in for Gravenberch and gets to play going forward and play forward. That's how I think I would set this one up. Up top, I think it's Mo Nunez. And I'm going to say Jota. And the only reason I say it is I just think the amount of travel and the minutes that Diaz has played for Colombia and is going to play again, I think it makes sense. I could see Jota through the middle as well. Jota played 5 minutes for Portugal. It was like a basic run out. He barely did anything. I just feel like he's going to give Darwin the start. It just feels like that's kind of in the stars at this point. And Darwin's kind of the player you want against Everton anyways. Gets at that back line. He'll make Tarkowski have to work. He'll make Michael Keane have to work, or Brathwaite, or whoever they start. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I think the back picks itself. I think we know that. So what is your prediction for this version of the Merseyside Derby?
I think it'll be closer than it should be. I'll go 2-1.
2-1. I'm going to actually say that we win it 2-0. But I think it's like you said. I think it's going to be very, very close in a cagey affair. Maybe we get a late one. I think Mo comes out firing in this. I don't know why. I just feel like he's at that point now where he knows he can create. And I also think he knows that he can attack both sides. Like, they can attack this Everton back line. I think Sean Dyche will show up super defensive. I also think that Everton is getting better at going forward, but they're still very much Jekyll and Hyde. And it really goes as far as Dominic Calvert-Lewin brings them. And he never seems to have the great performances against us that he showed early in his career. So I'm going to go 2-0. A late goal gives us the win. It's a really big win, in my opinion, because I think it sets us on a run that we need in the Premier League if we're going to really compete, because we have to be right there come the end of the year. So Alan gives us a 2-1 for the Redmen, but I hope we smash the Blue Nose. Brian Shelton jumps in, agreeing with me, 2-0, which means he will be wrong. I will just go ahead and drop it here. Timuchin says they're going to win 3-1 because that's what he says each and every single week.
Yep.
Because he's the positive one. So we will get out of here on this. Thank you, everyone, for viewing. Thank you for following along. Thank you for all of your support here at American Scouser. Please go to the YouTube page if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel for even more content. We have our Monday night podcast, our Thursday night podcast. We drop the Premier League show with Bickler and I each week, usually Tuesday or Wednesday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we have our morning coffee show with Timuchin and his band of merry men, as well as our sponsor from Reckless Coffee, who we truly appreciate so much. And don't forget the panel show. I'm probably forgetting other things like our pre and post match shows. And if you want to get involved, maybe you want to do a show, you want to do one of your own Liverpool stories for our website, please send us a message on Facebook, Instagram, or through X, formerly known as Twitter. And we will make sure to get you and your content out there. For all of us at American Scouser, we appreciate all of your support. We hope you have a great week. Up the Reds. And let's just go smash the shite that is Everton, right? Let's just get this done, guys. 7:30 in the morning. We're all going to get up early. We're all going to be angry. Klopp's going to complain about it. Ultimately, there'll probably be a bad call or two. But let's not talk about VAR. Let's not talk about the officials. Let's just talk about our guys going out and getting 3 points at home. So we'll be back next week. And as always, thank you. And we'll talk to you soon.